I'm gonna go ahead and shut the door. If anybody else comes in, great, blessings on them. And I'm gonna get started. So this class starts, it's done in a very traditional way. This class is intended to be a mini introduction to the process of satsang, which is the idea, is the way yoga was originally, hi, oh my God, yay, yes, come on in. This was the way yoga was actually originally performed. The stuff we do now, modern postural yoga, has lots of value. This is the original. How are you? You ready for your week to be over?
No.
Oh no. Okay. All right. Well, that's fun.
No, there's no break.
Oh, are you not? Do not like Friday off or whatever? All right. Well, that's a bummer. On that note, we're gonna get on to the beginning. The traditional way to open up practice, even though we don't do it this way, obviously anymore, well, some people do, but we don't in general, is to open with a chant. And the idea is that, one, the reason you chant in Sanskrit is the idea that the language itself is resonant and sacred. In fact, many schools of thought believe that the sounds of Sanskrit are actually the sounds of the goddess herself, right? So spirit itself is imbued within the language. And so when you chant it, you are invoking into the space a sense of, not quite formality, but more like sacredness, right? You're setting up the space. The chants we just did, the first is a chant to Shiva, who we're going to talk about today. And then the second is an invocation to Guru, the Trimurti, which we're actually going to talk about today also, so this is a really good day to come in there. And also the Guru within. So the idea is Guru is teacher, Guru is the mechanism through which we move from darkness to light. And so we ask that that idea be present here. And then the last chant is basically just like, here's a student and a teacher. We are consciously sitting in our seats because that is an important and sacred process that has existed since the dawn of time. And we're going to honor that. And let's have this work be reflective and honorable in relationship to that, which we call lineage. So that's what I chanted at the beginning of every class. I chanted because it's like, it's the way you honor the process, because you're chanting something that's super ancient. And it was taught to me by one of my teachers. So this week we are talking about Shiva. Shiva, not Shiva, or Shiva, I guess, is another way people say it. Shiva is the third of the Trimurti. So in South Asian philosophy / Hinduism / Trikashaivism / all of everything but Buddhism, there are three deities, three devas, that make up the baseline of the belief structure. So you have Brahma, who's the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer or the protector or the sustainer and protector, probably pretty good, and then Shiva, the destroyer. Brahma doesn't have dedicated groups to him necessarily. In fact, Brahma doesn't actually often get chanted to and doesn't get like a subgenre of worship, because in the big category of Hinduism, Brahma is everything. Brahman is where we're going. That is the supreme, the all, the everything. So he shows up in a lot of stories, but he's not necessarily a deity that has like I say cult in a serious way, not like a woo, like an actually doesn't have an actual like cult around him. Both Vishnu and Shiva, however, do. And depending on what line you're coming at Shiva in particular and Vishnu from, that kind of changes how you experience their mythology. So I say all this to give you the baseline of I'm coming at this as someone who studies Intrika Shaivism. So that means I'm centering Shiva. So for anyone who's not a Shivite, then you would have a different engagement with Shiva. So Vaishnavas have a very different experience of Shiva. No less powerful, no less important, but different. Because who they're centering is fundamentally Vishnu. So when you talk about where did Shiva come from? The stories that you mostly hear, you have literally the story aspect, and then you have like the actual lineage of how Shiva appeared as a deity, right, from an anthropological standpoint. Most of the stories I found were coming from the viewpoint of Vaishnavas. So the idea that Shiva was manifested from Vishnu is going to be centering that Vishnu-based religious structure. In my own path of study, we don't actually care where Shiva comes from. Weirdly enough, because he, in the way, and I'll dig into this a little bit deeper, there's not really a mythological story that I've recognized that tells you where Shiva came from. Shiva is all pervasive. He is consciousness himself, so I don't really care about his birth story. But if you are somebody who's looking at this from a mythological standpoint or a deity standpoint, then there's the story from the Vaishnavas that Shiva was born from Vishnu's forehead. So the forehead is the third eye center, right? That's the space of our higher awareness. It's the place where we connect to deeper understanding, archetypally and symbologically. Whatever. In the terms of its symbolism, the third eye is about awakening. It's about becoming aware of things. It's becoming all-knowing. So you can see deities, if they have three eyes, that means that Deva is awake, right? So Shiva you often see with three eyes. So the story from the Vaishnavas is Shiva was born out of Vishnu's forehead. So we'll go with that, because that's at least one story where it comes from. His name itself means the auspicious one. So it's the idea that Shiva, as the destroyer, is the one who is auspicious. I don't know that we love the idea of destruction in our culture. Like, I think we all like to envision ourselves as creators or creatrixes, but I don't know that embracing of destruction is something we're super good at. So the idea, first pass of Shiva being auspicious because he is the one who brings about destruction, can be really a powerful way to start shifting your viewpoint. He is considered to be the great yogi. His other name, if you listen to the Guru chant, when I talk about Mahadeva, that's Shiva, the great God. And it is because he is the great yogi. As the one who ushers in the destruction or the clearing out of that which we don't need, that's actually the catalyst for our own transformation. So because of that, that's where Shiva becomes like the Mahadeva. He is the one that you cannot escape from and you cannot avoid, because that destruction, when the time has come for you to put aside the things you no longer need, Shiva's coming for you, which is great. I mean, it's fine. It's not nearly as it's not scary. It's just like, it is what it is. Shiva has a bunch of symbols that are related to him being a yogi. So usually when you see Shiva, he's sitting in lotus, a meditation posture. He usually is sitting on some sort of like animal skin, usually like a tiger skin, I think sometimes it's like what might be a cow skin, but could either be another big cat skin. The point of that is it's like a seat of power, right? So he's sitting in lotus, he's sitting in meditation. It's often shown in the woods. Shiva loves to go off and like meditate in the woods and do his thing. Very much a deity that is a loner. Like, you know, it's so weird to put like human aspects on like concepts because really that's what these deities are. But yeah, Shiva's like, I do exactly what I want when I want to do it, and it means I'm going to go meditate in the woods now. Don't bother me. He's often seen with a trident. So that's a three-prong, like if you remember the Little Mermaid, like King Triton had a trident. Shiva also has a trident. It's a representation of his three aspects of Shiva, which inherent to Shiva is the ability to create and sustain and destroy, as same as like the overall Trimurti. It's also thought of as the three gunas. So the three aspects of the manifest world, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva, are represented in his trident. So he's showing you that the goal is equilibrium, right? Especially for someone who is embodiment of meditation. Meditation really isn't about anything but maintaining equilibrium. And that is what I think Shiva's trying to bring in with it. Like when he's destroying things or like removing things or clearing things, he's clearing it for equilibrium. He's also often shown covered in ashes. So if you've ever seen pictures of Shiva or devotees, ascetics in India, they will often have 3 lines across their forehead. That is a sacred ash, and it's representing that everything is fleeting. You'll sometimes see people completely covered in ash as part of their devotional process. That's usually ash that's been through some sort of ritual, burned up, burned several times, and then they cover themselves with it. And that's to devote to Shiva. Sometimes you'll see Shiva covered in total ash too. He often has a crescent moon on his head or somewhere near his head. And that's actually a remnant from the fact. So remember how I said there's like an anthropological discussion of Shiva and then there's like the God aspect discussion of Shiva. Anthropologically, or historically, or however you want to look at this, Shiva comes from a much older iteration of deity. So this is also why he doesn't necessarily have a creation story in some lineages, because he's actually much, much older. There are aspects of him that show up in the deity Indra, the god of weather, that have been kind of refined and pushed over. But one of the more famous aspects of Shiva is the god Rudra, who is considered to be like the fiercest form of Shiva, like the true, like, I'm gonna cut this off, this is done, burn it up, destroy it. That's like Rudra. So that's actually a much, much older deity that comes from the Vedas, but that is Shiva. So the crescent moon iconography comes from that Rudra character. He also is shown with matted dreadlocked hair. As far as symbolism, I'm not 100% sure what that's. So I'm sure there's somebody who does know this slides in, but it's why you'll see many aesthetics have dreadlocked hair and like the winds of hair with Rudrashka tied up in it. It's to, again, embody Shiva. I think part of it's like it's literally low maintenance, right? If you're out like meditating, it's pretty low maintenance. It's also fierce, right? There's an element of the Shiva quality that when you really begin to work with him or meditate or chant his mantras, the fierceness and the wildness is just as valid as I think sometimes the idea that we in the West have of like loving gods or like embracing deities. I think Shiva's ferocity in some ways, especially when you look at like the more ancient Rudra form, is really important too. And I think some of that's embodied too in like the way he looks. It's also why, you know, he sits on lion skin and like he looks like he's definitely been in the woods meditating for a while. And that's because those aspects of ourselves are also deeply important for transformation. Sometimes we have to be fierce in our own transformation and be fierce with ourselves as we begin to evolve. And I'd be lying to you if I said, you know, spiritual transformation was like all puppies, kittens, and rainbows. It's spoiler not. So sometimes you gotta be fierce. He also is often shown with a blue throat. That comes from the story of the churning of the cosmic ocean. So basically what happened is the world was in some I'm going to say this real fast because I think I've told this story a couple times, but basically the world was in big trouble. Lakshmi had gone into the ocean and she took with her all abundance. So like if you take away all abundance, everything's in some trouble. There's like no food, there's nothing pretty, there's no beauty. She's just like, you guys did it, I'm out, bye. So she goes to the bottom of the ocean. And the demons just start like losing it everywhere. They're being just monsters. Like they're taking over. They're being real trash. And so basically, through a few actions, the gods begin to churn the cosmic ocean to sort of bring Lakshmi back up from the base of the ocean. But as that happens, the poison gets released, not unlike kind of Pandora's box, right? So like you get, only it was just a little bit in reverse, but basically we're trying to get the good stuff out, but all this poison's coming up first. And Shiva's like, oh no, there's a bunch of poison. Everybody gonna die. Oh God, what do I do now? So he goes and he swallows the poison, and even Shiva can't take all the poison of the world on. It's a struggle bus, it's a lot, but he does his best. And so basically, Parvati, his wife, grabs him by the throat and chokes the poison down from escaping back out, and so then he has a blue throat from here on out. And that blue throat is symbolic of the way we have to sort of process and deal with toxicity, right? Not in like or like whatever our poisons are, right? Because we all have pros and cons, right? So it's part of how you process that. It's also like symbolic of, you know, if this is your belief structure, Shiva made a great sacrifice, like risk death for us in order to help us. And so those are, you know, important ideas in that structure. The Rudroshka, I forgot to bring mine. I have several, but if you ever see me like mala-ing around here, which does happen sometimes, I almost always have a Rudroshka mala. That is the seed. It's like a seed of Shiva. It's representative of Shiva. They're really hard to get now, I guess. Most of them are plastic, supposedly. But if you see Shiva, he'll have like a Rudroshka armband, and like they're all up in his hair, and like he wears them. And they're sacred, and they represent grace and meditation. So it's very, very common if you decide to chant like Om Namah Shivaya as a practice, as a japa practice, you would likely get like a Rudroshka mala. And then the last aspect of Shiva to talk about before I have some like real intense readings, which are great, is Shiva as Nataraj, the cosmic dancer. So Nataraj is the more modern name of this, but this is also the aspect of like Rudra and in some ways Indra that existed. And it's the idea that destruction is healing, right? That when we bring about destruction with joy, right, we dance to it, and that is the goal, then the process that clears the way for greater transformation can actually be beautiful rather than painful. And so one of the most common images you see of Shiva is him, arms outstretched. He's got 4 arms, he's got fire in one hand, he's got the fearlessness mudra in the other, he's got a drum, and the last thing usually switches off and on, but basically he's dancing, arms outstretched, one leg lifted and one leg dancing on like what looks like a small humanish form. And he's basically dancing on like the demon of ignorance, right? So he's dancing to clear the space with all of these things at his disposal, and he's doing it with great ecstasy and power and his own devotion, right? Because, spoiler, we're getting to the part of like hashtag we're all Shiva, right? So he's dancing to bring about transformation, and he's dancing to celebrate and embody the victory of illumination over ignorance, of balance over ignorance, of our own spiritual growth. And so our peak pose, if you go into the asana classes this week, is Natarajasana, and that's the yogic variation of dancing like Lord Shiva. And so if you practice with Shiva, which I have for a long time, he's like the one deity that, not the one, maybe number 2 that I've worked with the longest. There is an element of you become very deeply connected to Nataraj, right? Like the dancing to, or like the diffusing of energy or like the ecstasy of your own transformation is a really powerful thing to tap into. Like, how can you find joy? How can you find bliss? How can you find like movement or grace within the process of changing your life? Because that's what Nataraj is really about. And that's not always easy, frankly. Sometimes it's really difficult. Sometimes you're like, I'm not dancing or singing on any of this. This sucks. But when you get to that point where maybe you're far enough on the place where you're evolving and you're like holding on to this deep desire to grow, at some point, like a little bit of light sort of breaks through and you get that sense of like, I'm gonna be okay. And you're like, I'm gonna do this. I got this. Off you go. So he's a very widely worshipped form. Like many of like, if you go, I was just in Portland like 2 weeks ago, and they have, you know, a whole South Asian art section. There's almost always a Shiva there, a dancing Shiva, almost always. So check one out. I don't think we have one here. I have one at home. I'm trying to see if we have any pictures of them up there. No, just Shiva in seated form. But yeah, so that's the baseline of Shiva, and I'm gonna read to you hilarious and intense poetry because, you know, why not? So I study Intrika Shaivism, which is the Shiva centering modality that basically the baseline of it is your 1.5 jobs, because there's also like a sidebar job, but your job in this is to begin to recognize yourself as Shiva, to recognize yourself inherently as divinity. And whatever it's going to take for you to see yourself as Shiva, as ultimate consciousness, of an entity with power and agency and who wants to clear out everything that's unnecessary in their own arrogance and egoism to begin to move forward to a more enlightened self, that's what you do. Like, there's no other real rules beyond that. It's like, orient to the beauty, end of list. But I'm gonna, so that being said, from that lineage comes a lot of like Shiva-centric texts. So I'm going to read you an English translation of the Shiva Strokavali from Utpaladeva. It's kind of like, it's not a pure translation, so if you actually read like the formal one, it would be way more formal. But this is to me, a beautiful expression of like what happens when you start to see yourself as Shiva. So stotra number 2, the contemplation of the all-soul. May you be glorified, O essence of consciousness, appearing in many forms as Agni. Agni is the fire of your own sort of awakening, right? So it's like fire. The moon, the sun, Brahma, Vishnu, the mobile and the immobile. May you be glorified, O mighty fire, brilliantly lustrous from the smearing of the ashes, right? The ashes of Shiva, that remain of the universe, your soul oblation. May you be glorified, O mild one, because Shiva comes in so many forms, because we as humans trying to be Shiva also take many forms, so you kind of try to find the one that relates to you. Anyway, may you be glorified, O mild one, smooth and brimming with the finest nectar, O terrible one who burns away the entire universe. So sometimes like you need the fiercest one. Like I need the one that's gonna burn everything up today. May you be glorified, O Mahadeva, O Rudra, Shankara, Maheshvara, O Shiva, embodiment of the mantra. May you be glorified, O fire of Shiva, O dreadful one, who having absorbed the melting fat of the pieces of the 3 worlds remain yet auspicious. So Shiva's job is to melt away the fat and leave that which is valuable. May the Lord be glorified, O mysterious Shambhu, whose only definition is that he is devoid of all definitions. There's no way to define him. Glory to the imperceptible Lord, the antithesis of the Vedas and the Agamas, and yet the true essence of the Vedas and the Agamas. So in Trika Shaivism, the whole goal is to get away from duality. So they're like, he's both nothing and all of it. Good job. That's a test. Can you think in non-dualistic terms? Glory be to Shambhu, the sole cause of the universe and its only destroyer, who takes worldly form and who transcends the world. So basically, the point of this, which I didn't read the whole thing, it would have taken forever, it's pretty long. But the goal is, 1, when connecting to these deities, I've said this many times, the goal is to find the piece of the deity that creates illumination for you. And it's not about like worshiping the deities like in the way that I think we think about them. It's like, I've had a really tough week and today I need to be fierce, right? Or I've had a really beautiful week and I'm about to be filled with gratitude for Thanksgiving and like spending time with my family, and I need to be the loving aspect of this. And so it is easier for human beings to see themselves as Shiva when there's a piece of Shiva you want to connect to, right? And if the whole goal of Trikashaivism is to see yourself as divinity, as consciousness itself, then you have to find something to connect to. And so he takes infinite forms, as do all of us at any time. So how do you make that real for yourself? Which is rhetorical, you don't have to answer that. But like, what's it gonna take for you to see yourself as divine today? All of you, not just like the good pieces. Like, it's really easy to be like, I'm supremely generous and I did a great job at work and I did all these things. Yeah, that's easy. How do you take the toughest parts of yourself and say, okay, this is Shiva. This is also Shiva. This is also consciousness. Any questions on that? Shiva's my favorite. One of my favorites. I shouldn't say that. I mean, you can't really have favorites, but you also can. And then the last one comes from Laleshwari, who was a naked wandering poetess who literally was like, don't tell me what to do, I do me. Like at one point in the history around her, she said, so she wandered up to a village and she's like stark naked, and the villagers are like, what is your deal? And she's like, there are no real men in this world, so I don't have to put on any clothes. And they're like, okay, girl, yeah, okay, get it, bless. So she wrote poetry, was deeply devoted, deeply ecstatic, really beautiful stuff. And so for her, this is how Shiva appeared. O Guru, O Lord, I could not understand you, because I believed I was the only body, that I was separate. I could not see the essence of my soul. I did not know that you are me and that I am you. I did not know that we are one. Now my question is, who are we? Ooh, a twist. But yeah, so she's like, I didn't know that I was Shiva, and then I figured it out, and now it's like, how does that knowledge change me? So it's also the reality that like just the smallest piece of seeing the world in a different way, of clearing out that which you don't need, can completely change your worldview and identity. So never underestimate the power of destruction in your own life. Any questions? Shiva time. Thoughts, comments, concerns? There's so much Shiva content. It's out there, if you're interested. Yeah. Destruction. Destruction's a lot. Okay. Well, we're gonna chant to Shiva now. I didn't write this on the board. I don't know what that is, so I'm not gonna delete that. It's really easy to figure out. Here's the thing about chanting, since you've never been here before. You can chant with me, or you can just listen to me, or you can ignore me. All of it's the same to me. The chanting happens no matter what for me. We're gonna do Om Namah Shivaya, which is the pretty universally used mantra. Every time I teach Om Namah Shivaya, folks are like, what does it mean? And there's two answers. One, Om Namah Shivaya literally means Om and salutations to Shiva. Simplest form. As we go back to the idea that mantra is like divine, there's also the reality that mantra becomes illuminated for you, how it shows up for you. So to me, Om Namah Shivaya has always meant I bow to that which I am becoming. Because I am hopefully becoming more like Shiva every day, or at least more aware of my Shiva-ness. Maybe that's you too. Come into a seated meditation posture. So sit bones rooted, spine long and tall. Ideally, in not lotus, that's crazy. Definitely in easy seat pose, Sukhasana. You can use the wall. Do you want a blanket or bolster?
No, kind of.
Yeah. Wall time. Definitely use a wall. I want you to become deeply aware of your breath. Become aware of the lingering sounds of the harmonium, into the chant in the air. Close your eyes and just become deeply aware of your breath. Notice the nature and quality of your breath. What's the smell, taste, temperature of the breath as it moves in and out your nose. Bring all of your awareness inside. I'm going to go through what I use for my own personal meditation, and we're going to use Om Namah Shivaya as the mechanism for the meditation. You don't have to say it, just think it. There's going to be some visualization. So just become deeply aware of your breath. Take a big deep breath in and exhale. Inhale in and imagine the inhale going all the way into the root of the spine. And exhale, watch the breath travel up the spine and settle into the heart. Inhale deeply into the heart. And exhale, watch the breath travel up the spine to the third eye center. Inhale into the third eye. And exhale, watch the breath leave the body at the crown of the head. Inhale again into the root of the spine. Exhale to the heart. Inhale into the heart. And exhale into the third eye. Inhale into the third eye. And exhale out the crown of the head. And begin again. Inhale into the root, Om Namah. To exhale to the heart, Shivaya. Inhale into the heart, Om Namah. And exhale to the third eye, Shivaya. Inhale into the third eye, Om Namah. And exhale out the crown of the head, Shivaya. Inhale, root, Om Namah. Exhale to the heart, Shivaya. Inhale into the heart, Om Namah. Exhale to the third eye, Shivaya. Inhale into the third eye, Om Namah. And exhale out the crown of the head, Shivaya. Keep going in that pattern, either with or without the mantra. And try to let the breath flow from point to point in the body as smoothly as possible. If it's more comfortable to do it with just the breath, go with that. Here to finish out your last round, no matter where you are, take your time. Make sure the last round of exhales is from the crown of the head. And begin to bring yourself back to a more natural, neutral breath. Keeping your eyes closed, just take a subtle inventory of the way your body or mind space feels. Just make a note of any shifts in your internal perception. I'll close class today the way I always close class, and it's to ask you to think of one thing today you're grateful for. It could be big or small, serious or silly, it doesn't matter as long as you're soul level grateful for it. And when you know what that thing is, bring your hands together and undulate mudra over your heart and hold that thing and your gratitude and love for it in between your palms. I'm so grateful for the practice of yoga, and I'm so grateful for both of you coming here today to share your practice with me. Namaste in its simplest form means the light within me sees and humbly bows to the light within you. Dropping the chin towards the chest, bringing the thumbs to the third eye center and bowing forward to seal your practice. Namaste.
Great job. You guys did so great. This was like meditation zone, y'all. That was so good. All right, thanks people online. Om Namah Shivaya. Pin that one.